Hey vinyl community, it's Robert Fitton and just got back from Indianapolis and did a little bit of record shopping while I was there. Now, Indianapolis, Indiana is about 3.5 hours from where I am in the St. Louis area, so it wasn't too long of a drive. Nice little road trip there to Indianapolis and did some other things too, but had a little bit of time for a couple of antique shops and a few record stores. And one of the weird things I found I've never seen anywhere else is at this place called Trader Buck's in Indianapolis. This big, like, flea market type, antique mall type, well, really a flea market, this big place. Walk over, as soon as I went into the right, I saw this little crate full of, like, semi-new releases, or what would be considered releases from, like, the second era of vinyl, you know, current, more current things. And I'd never seen these in, like, a flea market or whatever before. And I guess there's some sort of Amazon warehouse type returns or something. But these were all $6 a piece. That was the news. Usually you don't see used vinyl like these for less than like 15 or something like that. So $6 a piece. I got a few things that I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I got a couple of things on blind buys that I had no idea what they were. Just because I want to start exploring some more current stuff on vinyl. But I could not pass that up. And again, I'd never seen that before anywhere, where you go to a flea market or an antique mall and there's a little case of like 180 gram, you know, vinyl from like the last 10 years. But that's certainly what happened here. First one, Lenny Kravitz, 5. This is his 5th album. Now, I've had this on CD since the 90s when I got it, when I worked at a radio station that played Lenny Kravitz. And he's not super high on my favorite lists of artists. He's okay. I really like his first album, Let Love Rule, just about all the way through. This one, later on, Fly Away is the big song on here. Another song called Live, that was around for a little while when it was new. I think that one's pretty much been forgotten about. Black Velveteen, pretty much the same way. So, I'm not a huge fan of this album, but it was good to be able to listen to this again after all these years. I'd heard it a couple times, like I said, early on in the 90s on CD. But interesting thing about this is they put a couple of bonus tracks on here. American Woman, which here in America anyway, that's pretty much his biggest hit at this point. That's his most played song on the radio anyway. American Woman. Everything else has kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside. A couple, you know, like Fly Away and Are You Gonna Go My Way still get played a little bit, but mostly it's American Woman. And just interesting that an artist like Lenny Kravitz has all those songs. The one he's going to be most remembered for is from a soundtrack, Austin Powers, and a cover song of the Guess Who. So that's just really strange. But that is actually on here as a bonus track. So is a song called Without You. And I just think it's kind of interesting that, you know, I've been around long enough now. I'm sure people my age will agree that you see things come just completely full circle. I remember when records were out, and that was the big way to listen to music. You know, you would only fit 45 minutes of music or whatever on a record. So the CD would come out and have a bonus track or two on it. It was, you know, bonus, only available on CD. And they would sometimes put those on the cassettes as well. So I just think that's really kind of cool that it's come all the way back around now that records are, you know, the length of CDs, but 2 album sets are a little longer. So you got to put a couple of bonus tracks on there, and just making it 1 disc, you know, you can't, there wouldn't be enough. So it's kind of that weird middle thing, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Second album, Whiskeytown. This is Stranger's Almanac. I'm kind of familiar with this one. It's Ryan Adams' band. I pretty much live in Uncle Tupelo world here in the St. Louis area on the Illinois side. So I've heard about these guys, you know, way back from when they were out. And this one does another little trick to make this a full double album. The actual full release is on the first 3 sides, and then side 4 is live material. So kudos to these guys for making, if you're going to make a double album, I always think you should come up with a way to make it a full double album, and none of this 15 minutes on a side thing. But Whiskeytown, it's not my favorite kind of music. I'm not really into the whole jangly, you know, post, you know, the country rock of the later. I'm not so much into, but if you're going to do it, you might as well do it with a band like Whiskeytown. So good to get to revisit this again, but probably won't be something I listen to over and over again. But again, $6 for a 180 gram double album. and by the way, all of these look like they've never been played, and they all have all of the inserts just like you'd buy them new. $6 a piece at a flea market. I've, again, never seen anything like it. Bob Dylan bringing it all back home. Love this one. I love the Bob Dylan era that this was out in. This one, Blonde on Blonde. What's the other one? There's another big one right in there too. Highway 61 Revisited. All of those, that whole era, awesome. And then the greatest hits that they came out with in 67 that really, culminated all of that stuff. Some of my favorite Bob Dylan stuff. I'm not so big on his 70s, so it was awesome to be able to get this. And this is an actual mono pressing of this. So I've only ever heard it on CD in stereo, so it was really cool to hear, the remastered, I don't know, I'm not sure when this came out, this particular pressing. It doesn't say. So, but yeah, the mono version of this on 180 gram vinyl. So it's a newer one, and really, I'm not a big fan of mono. But if you're going to have it, it might as well be something like Bob Dylan, where this actually does sound a little better than the stereo version, because all the little jangly things on the side, they all really are kind of mixed together here. It sounds incredible. So, really glad to get this again for $6 at a flea market. And again, this is the newer version of this, not the one from the 60s. And the same goes for Van Morrison, Astral Weeks. I had this in no form at all until I found it at that flea market. And again, this is the newer one, looking as though it's never been played. And I'm not the biggest Van Morrison fan in the world. There's a kind of a trend here. I'm not the biggest Whiskeytown fan. I'm not the biggest Van Morrison fan. I'm not the biggest Lenny Kravitz fan. But again, I'm not going to pass this up for $6 a piece. This one, I like some of his other ones better. But this, I'm going to listen to this a few more times because I know this is a highly regarded album as far as his catalog goes. I know this is probably on the Rolling Stone Best Albums Ever list or whatever, so I'm going to listen to this a few more times. But again, the pressing of this is incredible. The sound of this is really, really good. They really did a good job. And this is a Rhino thing, I'm sure. So, yeah, Van Morrison, Astral Weeks, definitely will be revisiting that. I also got the Black Crowes, Shake Your Moneymaker. This one, again, why are these all in this bin? That was what I was thinking. Is like, why are there all of these looking pretty much unplayed, brand new, current remaster, versions? This is not the old one from '90. This is the newer one. Why are these all $6 in this flea market, in this bin? It's just such a mystery. And then I see that they all have the same UPC label on it. And it's like an Amazon warehouse thing. So I'm like, well, why would all of these be returned? It's not like you're going to buy a Van Morrison album not kind of knowing who he is, or Bob Dylan or something. Just really strange. And then I looked up the pressing for this one after I put it on, and I found out why this is in the return bin. This sounds terrible. It's a great release from the Black Crowes. But as far as this album, this record, this pressing, wow. Totally distorted, completely compressed. I bet if you played this, I don't have this capability, I probably could do it, but if you played this with VU meters, the meters would just be like this. They probably wouldn't move. Totally that loudness war sound nonsense. And I would think that if you're listening to music on vinyl in 2019, one of the reasons is you're probably trying to get away from that overly compressed digital loudness war sound, and this completely has it. And then I see on Discogs.com that people are actually commenting, this sounds terrible. This is horrible. I mean, just distorted and whatever. So it is. So beware of the Black Crowes, Shake Your Moneymaker, the later release of that. So out of all of these releases that I found in this little crate, I think I was happiest to get the Bob Dylan and this one, the Best of Sharda. This is, again, $6. A double album. It's her best. Single version of a couple of songs instead of the album one. That's the only negative I could find about this. Again, I love the album cover, the feel of these newer ones. They have that matte finish, which is Great. And this has all the hits plus more, and it's Sharda, which when you hear her on vinyl, it really just makes sense. She's definitely one of those artists that sound like a record should be playing, and you're in some sort of tropical cabana. I don't know, but she's just definitely just, her music just has that sound where it just kind of takes you to another place, and it's consistent. It's not like there's suddenly a rap song on the middle of this, or there's some sort of, other, full-on pop thing. She always had her own thing going on, it seems like, and she was always able to sound completely different than anything that was on whatever radio format she was on, but at the same time, sound completely accessible. And I've always really liked Sharda, and never had any Sharda vinyl, and this is a good one to start with, the best of Sharda, so I was really happy to find this for $6 in that bin. I also did 2 blind buys, which I had no idea what these were, but for $6 a piece, and it's, double albums, newer vinyl, give it a shot. I really like the cover art of this. This is Tame Impala, and the album is called Currents. This is actually their most current album. Tame Impala is a group from Perth, Australia. Kind of like a dreamy kind of sound. They kind of sound like more of like a UK thing from maybe the late mid 90s, but it's just a dreamy kind of keyboardish, real long kind of lush kind of things going on there, and a really high vocal throughout from the lead singer. I'm going to listen to this a few more times, but I wasn't blown away by it. I really love the cover art, though. I love that. I love it that the resurgence of vinyl, one of the great things about it is that people, I think, have gone back to really thinking about cover art. And that was that's one of the things I've always loved about these 12-inch records. It's perfect platform for great artwork, and if it's a double, well, then you've got double the amount. So, but yeah, I'm going to give this a few more listens. But right now, it's basically just your basic kind of dream pop kind of stuff. I'm not a fan of the drumming in this at all. And it does have some of those finger snapping tracks. But I would assume the drumming on this is either augmented kind of drumming, or it's the most unimaginative drumming drummer ever. I don't know. Tame Impala is who the group is. And before I do any more judgment on that, I'm going to give this a few more listens. The other blind buy I made was, an album cover I don't really care for. I like the Tame Impala one better, but I love the music on here. Steven Wilson is his name. Insurgence is the album. This was his debut self-titled album. And I didn't know too much about him. I know he used to be in a group called Porcupine Tree. But I'd heard bits and pieces of stuff here and there, but I never really sat down and heard this guy. And I really want to get more acquainted with some more current music. And by current, I mean, the last 15 years. I do tend to go for the 60s, 70s, early 80s stuff. So I definitely need to go and get more educated on some more current stuff. But Steven Wilson, this is pretty good. This is considered prog rock, but I don't hear that. I mean, I hear a lot of progressive stuff in this, but this is more of like soundscape type stuff. It's a little more accessible, a little more melodic than just typical, straightforward soundscape, but kind of like a Pink Floyd-ish type of thing going on here. Steven Wilson is his name, English guy, and I definitely liked what I've heard so far. I'm going to listen to this again. Don't care for the artwork, though. I like artwork like this, where it's more of like art, and I'm not a big fan of just to take a picture and stick it on here, and then this is just, I'm not into that at all. But that's really the only thing. Music on here is great, and then I noticed that for people like myself, this one came with a nice little thing here about other releases on this label, and I just thought that was really cool. It reminded me of the old inner sleeves that used to come with, Capitol and Atlantic and RCA and Liberty and all the labels. Hey, try out these great releases, and they would make no sense because it would go from like Lawrence Welk to like Led Zeppelin or something. But that was cool to see this again. They kind of got away from that in the 70s and 80s, putting the you'll love these other releases too type stuff in there. So it was good to see that back again. That was one of the things I almost did one time. I almost came up with a thing where I was going to take like an Atlantic Atco inner sleeve, that advertises all the albums from like a particular period, and just try to go through and listen to every album on there. Maybe that we could start that trend where we start a new thing where everybody's listening to pick your favorite inner sleeve and listen to every album on it. But it was cool to get these. It was cool to get acquainted with these two, which I probably would not have if it wouldn't have been for finding these for $6 a piece. And this is his debut solo album, like I said. And so if anybody has any suggestions on like what later albums I should follow this up with, please put that in the comments section. Really glad I was able to get acquainted with these. I don't think I would have gotten these had it not been for just finding these for $6. So it was good to find these and do kind of a blind buy, and I certainly don't regret it at all, especially double albums. And that's something I was going to talk about too, was the whole double album thing. Like this one, for example, like some I mentioned earlier, like the Lenny Kravitz one or the Whiskeytown one, where they complement the album by putting bonus things on there, so it fills it out and it is a full double album. What I see way too much of, and this has been going on since the 90s, is albums that are double just because we're still thinking in terms of CDs. And I just wonder how long that's going to go on. I'm pretty sure that when most people consume music these days, it's either streaming, which has no rules on length, or we're back to vinyl, which to get the sound quality, it's about 45 minutes is what you want to max out at. How long before we're done thinking about hour-long releases and doing things for CD? Because that's why albums end up double with 15 minutes on each side, or something crazy like, one record will be 33 1/3 speed, the other record will be 45 speed, and just trying to like fit this square peg in this round hole and make this CD length thing work for vinyl. It never has. CDs were usually 50, 55, 60 minutes long, and you can't do that on a record without it sounding thin. And then you try to express that over 2 albums, and now you've got 15-minute long sides. So when will we get away from thinking, and I mean we as producers, record labels, artists, when will they, I should say, get away from thinking of things in terms of a length of a CD and get back to, if our tangible listening experience outside of streaming or whatever, downloading and whatever, if that's going to be records, when will we get back to thinking about releases as 45-minute things, 42-minute things, and for one album? I haven't seen too many that are just single albums, that are 45 minutes long. And that's what all of the classic albums pretty much were. And you didn't come out with a double album until you were an established artist. There's exceptions like Chicago and Frank Zappa and whatever. For the most part, Elton John, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, it goes on and on, didn't come out with double album releases until they were established artists. So it's kind of hard to digest new music like this when it's all so long. They're expecting so much of you. They're expecting you to delve right into a double album right out of the get-go, and then check out a different artist and delve right into their double album. So I hope we get back, if we're really serious about going in the direction of vinyl, as far as engineers, producers, record labels, start thinking about things in terms of the length of vinyl. But those new 180 pressings were not the only thing I picked up. There was a couple other cool little things I wanted to show you, like Dolly Parton, the fairest of all. I'm actually glad I got this. This is a really great record. And if you're thinking Dolly Parton and Islands in the Stream and things like that, her earlier stuff like this is really interesting, at least to me. This was kind of a more rare one. I'm really glad I got this. I'd heard this album, streamed it a long time ago, and thought it was brilliant. It's a lot of storytelling, it's a lot of melodrama, it's a lot of things you would not expect. If you didn't know about Dolly Parton's earlier RCA releases, you may not expect such themes. This album starts off, the very first line of this entire album is, "Here in this mental institution." So already this is not a typical country, my lover's gone, or we're so happy in love type of thing. Everything on here has some sort of, almost some sordid story. It starts off with her husband gets tired of her, wants a new wife, so he commits her to an insane asylum, and she's asking her dad to come and get her. She's not crazy. That's the first song. Second song, she's been taking care of this guy. She's been the maid in the house, and I don't know, I think the wife died, so now they're in love and all this. There's I want to say there's a miscarriage on here. There's a whole story about that. And that's the single. The single is the one about the miscarriage. The album ends with incest. Is that not enough to convince you? This is not an ordinary album. Dolly Parton, the fairest of them all. Do not let that princess kind of cover fool you. This is some interesting stuff on here. Glad I got this. Also, pick this one up. This is Alice Cooper. Love it to death, and I love this album to death. This is I've had this on CD for years and have listened to this over and over again. Caught in a Dream is a great way to kick this off. Other great songs in here like Is It My Body, Black Juju's on here, Sun Arise, Long Way to Go, I love that one, and Ballad of Dwight Fry, which I think is more about the character he played, not the actor Dwight Fry, who unfortunately always tried to get away from being typecast as that kind of crazy bug-eyed guy. But then Alice Cooper comes out with a song about the character and actually calls it Dwight Fry. So that's too bad. I'm 18, I was never really a fan of, but that's the big song on here. But I actually got the cover. That was censored later because apparently Alice Cooper's thumb looks too much like a penis. So yeah, I was glad to finally, because I've seen this different places or whatever, but it's always been the censored cover. So finally was able to get the original cover with the thumb still intact. Great album from Alice Cooper. Commodores, Machine Gun. I got a lot of Commodores. This is a really early one, and I've never seen it. This was like $1, so I'd never seen it for that cheap before, so I picked this up. And Machine Gun is an instrumental from the Commodores, and it actually kicks off this album, which is kind of different to kick off an album with instrumental. This is early Commodores from the early 70s, and it's really got that unfiltered kind of funk sound that I just love. Not so big into the later 80s R&B stuff where it's kind of polished and it's reverb and it's all this big sound. I really love the tight, that drum sound, that hi-hat, all that stuff, that bass where you can make out every instrument. And this certainly has that. Only thing about this album, got to watch out for track 2, Young Girls Are My Weakness. That is one of the creepiest songs I've ever heard, and I'm surprised Commodores do something like that. But Young Girls Are My Weakness. It's exactly as bad as that title suggests. Just check out Machine Gun from the Commodores. Skip over track 2. There's a little bit of social commentary kind of stuff on here too, kind of surprising that doesn't show up in later Commodores releases. Also managed to find The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. I already had this, but I had some weird pressing of this, and was able to finally find, just for $1, the original track record version of this from Terre Haute, Indiana. Imagine that, because I was in Indianapolis. But yeah, I love this album. Fire. I've always loved that. Ever since I saw the... they used to show the video. It wasn't considered a video, but they used to show that television appearance all the time of him on like flashback shows where he had the fire coming out of his kind of helmet that he had on, and just the freakiest thing. And I had to find out what in the world that was. And I had the 45 for a long time. Found the album for this, I don't know, about 10... No, it was longer than that. About 20 years ago at this point. But it was some sort of like, I could pull it out, but it's some sort of like weird pressing that's not official or something. This is the actual real deal, so glad to finally get this. And that's it. That's my Indiana trip. A few antique malls / flea markets where I found those incredible selection of, 180 gram vinyl for $6 a piece. Actually left some there too, so if you want to check out, I don't know if they're still there, but Trader Bucks in Indianapolis, I left stuff there because I didn't want to be like a hog and just grab up there. I don't like doing that, like gobble up everything. So I left things in there. There's another Best of Sharda in there. If you want to waste your money on the Black Crows, sounds horrible, but that's in there. And there's some other stuff in there too. There was I can't remember now. You have to go for yourself. There was other stuff there too. I didn't recognize what it was. So, Trader Bucks in Indianapolis, you could check that out. But also checked out Karma Records in Indianapolis. That's man, it's great to see vinyl back where there would be a record store that has 3 locations. And this one does 3 different locations for a record store. Not only records, but also all the bongs and pipes and all that right there too. Karma Records in Indianapolis. And good as going record stores and... this many records, this many CDs, and everybody's looking at the records. So thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you will subscribe and not miss any of my upcoming videos that I want to do, all for the vinyl community. Like the video, please. Comment. I would love to hear comments. I always reply to them. And thanks so much for watching.